After 15 years of managing my father's company, I had finally grown it into a business worth $70 million. During a family dinner, my father looked at me and smiled. Then he said, "Your brother will take over now, since he's my only son." My heart sank. But I smiled back and replied, "All right, Dad." The next morning, everything changed at work. I still remember the way my father smiled that night. His hand rested proudly on my brother's shoulder, as if the decision had been made long ago. As if he'd been waiting for the right moment to say it out loud. As if he had chosen Johan from the very beginning. "Your brother will take over now." I felt my stomach twist, like it was filled with butterflies. But years of experience had taught me how to keep my composure. So, I smiled, as if his words hadn't cut through me like a knife. As if they hadn't erased 15 years of my dedication in a single moment. The dining room was alive with the clinking of glasses, soft conversation flowing among family members and business associates. It wasn't just a family dinner. It was a celebration. A moment meant to honor everything we had built. Everything I had built, every hour, every sacrifice. My father founded Magnus and Company when I was just a child. Back then, it was a small logistics business, barely staying afloat. I watched him struggle through the early years, working late into the night, skipping family vacations, doing everything he could to keep the business alive and provide for us. When I was 24, fresh out of business school, he finally let me take on a role in the company. But I had to fight for it. I had to prove myself. And I did so much more than just take a position. I transformed Magnus and Company from a near-bankrupt regional firm into a national powerhouse. I expanded our operations. I secured million-dollar contracts. I integrated cutting-edge technology. What was once a dying company became a thriving industry leader worth $70 million. And yet, in that moment, none of it mattered. My father had already made his decision. My brother Johan would take over. Not me. I heard a wave of approval ripple through the table. Relatives and friends congratulated him. I watched as he lowered his gaze, pretending to be humble. But he was never humble. Not even a little. And I knew the truth. Johan never cared about this company. He had spent the last decade jumping from one failed business to another. He had no passion for logistics. No interest in operations. But power? He craved it. He wanted to show everyone that he had it. I had spent 15 years proving myself, building the company from the ground up, making every tough decision, negotiating every deal, staying up late for every critical call. And Johan? He had done none of that. Yet there we were. I swallowed my feelings. I had learned long ago that in this family, showing pain was the same as showing weakness. And I wouldn't let them see me weak. I picked up my wine glass, steadying my hand before raising it. "To Johan," I said, my voice calm and controlled. Everyone raised their glasses, completely unaware of the storm rising inside me. Across the table, my mother gave me a look. One I couldn't quite read. But I knew she understood. Unlike my father, she had always seen the effort I put in. But she never interfered. Never. And then, there was my father. Smiling with that unshakable confidence. Completely blind to the fact that his decision had set something in motion. Something he could no longer control. Johan looked at me from across the table, a smug smile playing at the corner of his lips. And in that moment, I knew, with absolute certainty. This wasn't just my father's decision. Johan had waited for this. He had played his part perfectly. Johan had been waiting for this. He had positioned himself carefully, playing the role of the devoted son who had finally found his calling, filling our father with pride. And my father, stuck in his old ways, saw no flaw in his logic. A son should inherit the empire. A daughter, well, a daughter's efforts were always seen as temporary. As if everything I had done was just an obligation, a footnote in the company's story, no matter how hard I fought to prove otherwise. But what neither of them realized, what neither of them accounted for, was that I hadn't spent 15 years just building a company. I had spent 15 years strengthening my position within it. And by tomorrow morning, they would understand exactly what that meant. That night, I barely slept. My mind replayed every sacrifice I had made for Magnus and company. The sleepless nights, the birthdays missed, the relationships that crumbled under the weight of my ambition, all fueled by the belief that one day, it would all be mine. I gave everything to this company. And now they expected me to just step aside? No. Never. They underestimated me. As a woman. As a daughter. As a leader. By 2 a.m., I was already in my home office, my fingers flying across the keyboard. Every contract, every share, every executive agreement, I knew the inner workings of this company better than anyone. Even better than my father. Johan thought he was walking into a smooth transition. He believed that by next week, his name would be on the office door, his position secured. What he didn't know was that while my father busied himself with public appearances, and Johan pretended to learn the business, I was securing something far more valuable: control. At exactly 7:45 a.m., I walked into the headquarters of Magnus and Company, just like I had for the past 15 years. Same walls. Same polished floors. Same hum of efficiency as employees settled into their routines. But today was different. Today, I wasn't stepping into my office. I was stepping onto a battlefield. And I was ready to win the war. The reception area was oddly quiet. The kind of silence that comes right before a storm. They knew. The rumors had already started. News of my father's announcement at dinner had spread like wildfire. The employees looked at me with hesitant expressions, avoiding direct eye contact, unsure of where to place their loyalty. I didn't flinch. I didn't pause. I walked forward with confidence, my heels clicking against the marble floor, my posture unshaken, as if nothing could touch me. Never let them see you shaken. I entered my office and closed the door behind me. I had exactly 15 minutes before my father and Johan would arrive. Believing they were about to step into their new roles as CEO and rightful heir. 15 minutes before everything they had planned would collapse in front of them. I sat at my desk, took a deep breath, and powered on my computer. The screen lit up with a list of confidential documents and contracts. The ones they never bothered to check. The ones they thought didn't matter. The ones they completely overlooked. I opened my ownership records. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second before clicking on the file titled Executive Shareholder Agreement. Then I waited. I took another deep breath. At exactly 8 a.m., there was a firm knock at the door. I didn't bother answering. The door swung open, and in walked my father and Johan, both radiating confidence. His, natural. Johan's, carefully crafted. My father entered like a king inspecting his kingdom, while Johan wore an expensive navy blue suit. Johan gave me a smug, triumphant smile, as if he truly believed he was better than me. It took everything in me not to laugh. Mary, my father said in his usual authoritative tone, full of self-righteousness, as if acknowledging me with some kind of favor. I assume you're aware of the transition happening today. Transition? I repeated, a faint, ironic smile tugging at my lips. Interesting choice of words. Yes, I'm aware, I said, leaning back in my chair. I glanced at Ihan, whose smug grin only widened. Excellent, my father continued, nodding as if we were all in agreement. Ihan will be taking over as the new CEO. We'll need your help during the transition so he can familiarize himself with operations before you move on. I raised an eyebrow. Move on? I echoed, feigning confusion. Dad, I think you're mistaken about something. His face tightened with irritation. He was used to my compliance, my ability to adapt without protest. He just wasn't prepared for this. Mary, he said, his voice tense, as if speaking to a child. This isn't up for debate. The decision's been made, and it's final. I smiled then. A slow, confident smile. Oh, I know, Dad, I said softly. The thing is, you don't have the authority to make that decision. Ihan let out a low chuckle and shook his head, as if I were insane. Mary, don't make this difficult. We're trying to do this the easy way. I didn't reply. Instead, I picked up the remote and pressed a button. The large screen on my office wall lit up with a document, the same one I had reviewed earlier. Executive Shareholders Agreement. Signed on January 15, 2017. Signatories, Mary Magnus, James Magnus, father, Johann Magnus. My father's face went slightly pale. I turned to Johann. You know what this document is? He crossed his arms, visibly uncomfortable. A shareholders' agreement, he guessed. I nodded. Yes. And do you know what it says? I tapped the screen, highlighting a crucial clause. This agreement was drawn up when Magnus and Company was restructuring. It clearly states that any executive power transfer, including CEO appointments, must be approved by all majority shareholders. I locked eyes with my father. And I, Dad, hold 65% of the company's shares. The silence that followed was suffocating, truly agonizing. My father's expression hardened. That's impossible, Johann muttered, stepping closer to examine the document. Actually, it's very possible, I said firmly. Over the years, while you were failing at every startup and Dad was busy with public appearances, I was doing something else. I leaned forward. I was securing my position, proving this place was mine. I turned back to my father. Remember when you needed capital for expansion in 2015? You transferred another 15% of your shares to me in exchange for my investment. And in 2019, during that legal battle, another 15% was transferred to my name as collateral, and you never bothered to reclaim them. Add that to my original 35%, and I became the majority shareholder. My father clenched his jaw. Johann looked horrified. You've got to be kidding, he spat. I pulled out a second document. This is the most recent legal filing with the state. Want to take a look? Johann snatched the paper from my hands and read it, his face draining of color with every line. You can't do this, he stammered. Dad, tell her she can't do this. My father remained silent. He knew I had outmaneuvered him, legally and strategically. And there was nothing he could do. I exhaled slowly and stood up. I'm not going to fire you, Johann, I said. I won't force you into the real job market. But you will report to me and work under my leadership. Otherwise, I pointed to the door, you're free to leave. Johann turned to our father, his eyes pleading. But for the first time in his life, my father had no answer. Because that company was no longer his. It was mine. The silence was crushing. Johan was still holding the document so tightly his knuckles were white. My father stood motionless beside him, expression unreadable, but I knew that look. He was calculating, searching for a way out. But there wasn't one. I had spent years preparing for this, not because I expected betrayal, but because I learned long ago. Never trust loyalty when power is on the line. For the first time, my father looked at me like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he never really had. So that's it? Johan finally said, bitterness in his voice. You're just going to take everything? I let out a dry, humorless laugh. Take everything? I stepped closer. Johan, I built this company from the ground up. Every contract. Every expansion. Every innovation. While you were failing, I was keeping it alive. I leaned in slightly. So no. I'm not taking anything. I'm keeping what's already mine. Johan's face twisted in rage, but he had no argument. And worse, my father knew I was right. He had spent years believing blood outweighed competence. That his son would inherit what was rightfully mine. He underestimated me. And now he was paying the price. You're making a mistake, Mary, my father said at last, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but tense. A family should stay united. Do you really want to burn this bridge? I looked him straight in the eyes. Dad, I said slowly, you burned that bridge the moment you made this decision without me. His lips pressed into a thin line. Business is bigger than one person. We can find a solution that works for everyone. I tilted my head, pretending to consider it. I agree. That's why I'm offering you both a choice. I turned to Han first. You can stay at the company, in a consulting role, with limited authority. The salary will be generous. But you'll report to me. I continued. Or you can leave. I'll buy your shares at market value. Take the money and find a new project. My father scoffed. You're acting like you hold all the cards. Like you're in full control. I smiled. Because I am. The silence that followed was thick. Finally, my father shook his head, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. I never thought you'd do this to your family, he murmured. His words stung. But I didn't respond. Because in the end, it didn't matter. What mattered was that I wasn't going to let them take what I built. Johan stormed out first, furious. Good. I knew exactly what he would do, spread the betrayed brother's story, play the victim. I didn't care. I wasn't here for family approval. I was here for the future. My father hesitated, as if waiting for me to change my mind. I didn't. He gave a slow nod. You've changed, he said quietly. I met his gaze. No, Dad. I just stopped pretending. He left. I let out a breath and sat down. I should have felt victorious. I had won. But what I felt was a quiet emptiness. A part of me always wanted my father's approval. But the truth is, he never really saw me. And now he had no choice. This was my company. I turned back to my computer, my focus sharpening. I had spent 15 years building this company. Now, I would spend the next 15 making it untouchable. My father and brother tried to take everything from me. But in the end, they were the ones who lost it all. For the first time in 15 years, my office was silent. No calls from my father. No passive-aggressive emails from Ihan. But silence doesn't mean peace. It means the war had begun. I knew my father wouldn't give up easily. And Ihan would fight tooth and nail to take back what he thought was his. By the next day, I could feel the tension in the air. Employees who used to greet me confidently now hesitated. Some senior leaders avoided eye contact. I knew what was happening. My father and Ihan were activating the Whisper network. Old friends, board members, senior executives. Planting seeds of doubt, painting me as cold, ruthless, disloyal. So I called an emergency board meeting. As I walked into the room, I felt it. That tension. Half the people avoided my eyes. The other half stared too intently, waiting for me to stumble. I sat at the head of the table. My seat. Let's not waste time, I began firmly. I know there have been closed-door conversations. Over dinners. In hushed tones. I looked at every face, making them shift in their seats. I also know some of you are wondering if my leadership is sustainable. I tapped the table. Let's clarify that now. I launched a presentation. Numbers. Data. Facts. I transformed this company from a dying regional firm to a $70 million market leader. We increased revenue by 300% in 4 years. We expanded into 6 new markets. I turned to the CFO. Joseph, do we have any financial indicators suggesting this company is at risk under my leadership? He hesitated, then shook his head. No. In fact, projections show another 20% growth next quarter. I nodded slowly. So let's be honest. My father and brother aren't upset because the company's failing. They're upset because they expected me to step aside. I let the silence settle. Then I dropped the bomb. I also know some of you were contacted in the last 24 hours. Offered incentives to pressure my resignation. I tilted my head slightly. If anyone would like to disclose those conversations now, this is your chance. A senior executive cleared his throat. I got a call from your father. He said he was considering appealing to the board formally. I nodded. And did he offer you anything in return? A pause. A nod. There it is. I stood. My father built this company. I won't deny that. But I was the one who took it further. And I will not allow him to manipulate it from the outside. My voice dropped, resolute. If he wants a fight, he'll get one. I looked each board member in the eye. If anyone here believes my father or brother deserve control, speak now. Silence. No one moved. Good. I left the room with my head held high. This wasn't just about keeping my company. It was about making sure they never thought they could take it from me again. That night, I made my own call to the local press. The next morning, the headline read, "Power shift at Magnus & Co., Mary Magnus outmaneuvers family in boardroom battle." I had made my move. Now it was their turn. And I was ready. If it were you, what would you have done in my place? Do you think I did the right thing, or was I truly cruel to my father and brother? Let me know in the comments.